Welcome and thank you for tuning in to ACTV. I'm your host, Jenny Davidson, CEO and Executive Director at Stand Up Placer. We serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Today in the studio, I want to welcome two very special guests who will be talking with us today about their experiences with domestic violence, their journey to recovery, and their passion to walk alongside survivors of violence today in their careers. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Debbie Livingood is a crisis counselor at our Safe House with Stand Up Placer, and Ms. Chevis Mays is our housing manager. Both amazing women who I'm very proud to call my coworkers.
Thank you.
And I'm excited for today. I'm excited for us to have this conversation and to be able to talk about some of the things that people think you can't talk about, right? There's a lot of stigma, and you both have so much courage and your willingness to come forward and have this conversation. So I want to just really honor that and say thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So you both have experienced this really traumatic event in your past. Can you just maybe give us a brief little introduction to maybe how long you were in a relationship as this happened more than once? Just a very, just let us know a little bit about why you wanted to be part of this today. Let's start with Debbie.
Okay, so I was in a relationship for approximately 20 years. Wasn't always bad, and that makes it difficult to decide, if it's always bad, it's kind of easier to decide you want to leave. The reason I'm happy to be here today is because of the process was not handled on my own, and if it had not been for Stand Up Placer, who helped guide me through the entire process, through therapy, case management. The first call I made did not have to be an all or nothing. I didn't have to decide that day. It was all at my pace. The choices I made, it took a while. It was a process, but Stand Up Placer was there the entire process, and that's why I am happy that they then hired me to work and help other people with the same issues going on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, for me, this is actually I've experienced a domestic violence relationship twice in my life. The last one was pretty much the one that broke the camel's back for me, to understand and realize that this behavior is not okay. And Stand Up Placer, when I was in my abusive relationship, there was no Stand Up Placer. There was nobody for me to call. So being able to do this work and help survivors understand that it is not your fault, and help and resources are available, and all you need to do is pick up the phone. And like Debbie said, it's not a know-all be-all situation. You can take your time and go through the process. So that's why I'm here and why I do the work. I'm very dedicated to the work, and my goal is to always help survivors get to the next place in their life.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And that phone number, if there's anybody at home who needs help, or somebody who needs help, our phone number is 1-800-575-5352, and they can call that day or night. Got maybe a 30% chance of hearing Debbie's voice answer that phone. And so tell me about that first time that you reached out for help. What is it like to kind of come to the realization? Because I'm guessing that there was a lot of back and forth just in your heart before you even made that phone call. But that moment when either you picked up the phone for the first time or you walked into an office for the first time, what was that like? What went into making that decision?
Well, for me, it was a lot of fear. A fear of, am I going to be able to get the help? Will my abuser find out that I'm doing this? But as I've learned, abuser 7 times, and so there's a leaving process even in that thought process. In your mind, you've left, but just having the courage not to pick up that phone. So for me, it was scary, and it was sweet at the same time. Once I finally did make that call to get out, and unfortunately, it wasn't a shelter that I was able to call. It was that friend that said, "When you're ready, give me a call, or let's work on a safety plan. Let's pack up keys. Let's, put some money away so that when you do leave, you don't have to go right back. So that's what it was like for me.
So something that you said made me think, during those times when you are considering leaving, you called a friend, and how does it impact you? We've heard a lot of statistics around when that person you call believes you, and whether or not they're willing to stand alongside you and help. What was that experience like for you? Was it positive? Did you were believed?
It was a good experience because the person that I was able to call had seen the abuse firsthand. And it was me that wasn't ready to go because I felt like I could change my abuser, or it would just stop, or it was something that I needed to change within myself in order for the relationship to work. So they pretty much just was like, when you're ready, because them constantly telling me that you need to leave, I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So it just took a place for me to be ready, and it was very nice having somebody who did believe me and who was able to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that, because when I made the call, a lot of the reason that I hesitated was I wasn't ready either to say, well, I'm leaving. And that's what was great, is that there wasn't any pressure. It was a long process. And the person I told actually was someone I had never met in person. It was a friend I met online for other reasons that I told because I think I felt no fear that person would then be able to impact my life in a way. But what she did was call stand-up classer for me several times. And I finally got the courage to call myself. Took a few times of calling to finally then even really admit what was going on and then begin that process.
So one thing that you each sort of touched on then is also the cycle of violence. And Chevis, I know that you teach this all the time. I could try and explain it to our audience, but I think you would do a fantastic job. Can you talk a little bit about the cycle of violence, about sort of the honeymoon period and the grooming and the things like that go into why do women stay, or men, or whoever, stay in a relationship longer?
Well, it's just like anything. It's really like a honeymoon. When you meet the person that you feel like you could build a relationship with or a life with, everything's nice, everything's beautiful, everything is just, the sun is shining on every area of the relationship. And then eventually after the relationship, we got to get back to our normal lives. We got to go to work, we got bills to pay, and it's kind of like that in the relationship. You come out of the honeymoon phase, and then you get into what you would call the tension building, or just the normal part of life. The tension starts to build where you're not so mushy anymore. It's not so loving anymore. It's kind of like the victim is feeling like they're walking on eggshells. They're getting on the abuser's nerve, or things is just not like it was in the beginning. And then comes, after the tension building, it comes the explosion. This is where it finally happens. You receive your first name calling. You might receive the person might hit you for the first time. And it's just at its worst. It's kind of like a tea kettle. It's on the pot, it's boiling, and then it finally whistles. That starts our whole explosion. And then it comes back into the honeymoon phase, because this is where the perpetrator is now saying, I'm sorry, it wouldn't have happened if. And that puts the blame back on the victim. If you had not have said this, or if you had not have done that, it never would have happened. So the victim now needs to be the one to fix everything. And you get back into that honeymoon phase to where it might last a day, it might last a month, you don't know. But then that whole cycle, it just continues and continues and continues. And it doesn't stop.
And sometimes what we see is even that honeymoon phase could go away completely, and all you have left is the tension and explosion.
Yes.
And Debbie, you mentioned something about just that feeling of fighting in the beginning and trying to fight for your safety, for your well-being, and at some point that fight goes away. And how does that make you feel? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I remember giving up, because it takes so much energy, emotionally and physically, to try to figure out what's going on and stay on top of it, and fight back. And then eventually I became so worn down that I didn't have that strength left anymore, and did give up. I didn't give up to the point that I didn't care anymore. I just didn't have the energy anymore, or it didn't work. No matter how much energy I put into changing things, fixing myself, which I thought was the whole problem, and nothing changed. And I did realize that false sense of any control I felt I had over my abuser by what I did, how I acted, what I did or didn't do, was not true. I had no control over someone else's behavior. And that was huge for me to finally realize that.
Yeah.
It was.
We talked a little bit about gaslighting. And so gaslighting is a term that's coming back into popularity, but it's actually based on a pretty old play and a television or a movie about an abuser who would lower the gas on the lights over a period of time in order to convince their victim that she was going crazy. And so did either of you experience a time in your relationships where you really felt like maybe I don't remember that correctly, or maybe because it convinced you that what you remember happening didn't happen, or it happened in a different way? Did that ever happen with either of you?
Well, it definitely happened with me, and the gaslighting process, it really worked, because there were times where I would question myself because I didn't remember. Maybe I did do this, or maybe I didn't, or just literally like forgetting where I placed things, and it pretty much fed into the manipulation of my abuser and confirmed, oh, well, you are crazy. See, you can't do anything right. And so that definitely takes place in an abusive relationship. I don't believe that a victim can really be fully abusive without gaslighting. It's part of the behavior.
The crazy making.
Part of the crazy making.
And I think over time what can happen is the person, it's after some time, it gets so exhausting that you will start failing at things, simple things like making a grocery list and preparing meals for the family is so overwhelming. That's why case management is so important. It's not because people are not smart enough to figure out how. It's that every day is spent focusing on getting through today. There's no energy left for planning next week, or even planning anything enjoyable like a vacation. The basics all start to falter, and then that also aids the abuser, because then suddenly the victim appears to be not holding up their end of things. They're not, handling life the way that they used to. And I think if somebody, or care about seems also to be preoccupied a lot, which can come across as self-absorption, it could be that there is something much deeper going on than just, being lost in their own thoughts. So it is something to check on.
Yeah, and also it literally makes you sick. It's not just, the average headache. There's a lot of domestic violence could cause, post-traumatic stress disorder, high blood pressure. There's a lot of physical ailments that take place, which also, plays into the gaslighting. So the mental abuse of it all.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
So Debbie, tell us about the day that you left, or what happened a couple times before that, but what was the first time, not the day that you left, but the first time that you walked into a stand-up plaster office? What went into that? I know that there are probably people watching this from home who feel like, I need to leave this relationship, but I don't know how to leave. And you have such an interesting story.
Well, I went there, all or nothing was kind of my mindset. I thought, if whoever I end up talking to when I get to this place doesn't get it, doesn't understand, or doesn't believe me, I kind of had it in my head that this is kind of my last step. And having said that, I had amazing family. It wasn't that. It said I did not reach out to anyone because I blamed myself. So this was my kind of all or nothing. I got there thinking, this is it. It all hinges on this one person. However, Stand Up Plaster was there. They were there for me. I had an amazing therapist, and all of the staff welcomed me, and there never was any pressure, which then enabled me to continue to grow, to heal those wounds, to have enough energy to get up to actually make some changes in my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so one of the first steps for you was therapy. You actually started therapy before you entered the Safe House program.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what was it like to come into a safe house? I think like we've all seen movies and it seems like it's this scary place with a million bunked beds in one big room and Nurse Ratched is going to scream at you and make you do things. What is it really like? How did it feel? How does it feel even, like what is the experience that somebody will have if they come into a safe house?
Well, my experience was that it was actually nothing like what I had pictured. It was a supportive environment where, kind of like a family environment, where the support is there. When I first got there, I probably didn't leave the room for a few days. You're kind of getting acclimated and tired. And then as I was ready to interact with staff, such as the case management, taking those necessary steps, therapy, and other clients who we also, can be a great support because it's people going through the exact same thing. It was exactly what I needed. Mm-hmm. It was a way to get away from everything else and focus on what needs to happen in the next 90 days to prepare for a peaceful future. And that is what Stand Up Placer gave me, is hope for peace. That was the very first thing I remember experiencing that day that I went to the office was a hope of a future that would also include joy, but I have that now, I can say, and it is peace and joy that I experience. So
that's awesome.
And yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Debbie.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one really major problem that we have is sometimes the first intervention is actually law enforcement. Law enforcement shows up on the scene, and I would say 90% of the time we hear really good stories about our interaction with law enforcement. We partner very closely with law enforcement here in Placer County, and usually have very positive experiences and stories. But Chevis, do you want to touch on just in general, what if something does go wrong for a family? What might that be like?
When law enforcement is responding to a call, of course, emotions is high on both ends, and so their job is to assess the situation and make sure that they're arresting the correct person. With my personal experience, I was the one that was arrested, and I was the victim. However, law enforcement figured, well, you're not going to say what he did to you, so since you're not, we can see the bruises on your face right now, we see it, but since you're not going to say he did it, well, we'll just take you. So I think law enforcement needs to be more sensitively trained and know how to assess situations better, because those types of situations can cause people's lives to change drastically, unnecessarily. And understand, victims they're afraid when they respond. They want the abuse, just want the abuse to go away. So I think sensitivity training and being aware of exactly what domestic violence is. I don't know if they're mandated to have domestic violence training, but if not, I feel like they should.
And some other fears that people have is if they call and report to law enforcement, they're afraid they may lose their kids. They're afraid that
employment.
They may lose their employment, or their abuser could lose their employment, and sometimes they're the main breadwinner and they don't know how they'll make ends meet.
Right.
They don't know that there's a safe house. They don't know that there's a housing program. They don't know that there's a whole safety net out there. So if you're listening at home, if you know someone, you have a friend, you have a loved one who's experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, please do call our crisis line.
Please.
At 800-575-5352, and just know that there's this entire support system of amazing people who are there to make sure that you get through it and you don't have to be alone. I think that's one of the really incredible things for people who access services to us, is the fact that there's no part of this where they have to be alone. So I know, Chevis, you do a lot of on-scene accompaniments to the hospitals, or if there's a domestic violence incident, we can even respond to the home as long as law enforcement's there and we know that things are safe. And so, and then even court, we can go with clients to court so they don't have to face their abuser sometimes for the very first time in court. And so that's all just fantastic as well. So do call if you need help and know that you won't be alone. And then I think the next step in your journey was housing. And Chevis is our housing manager. So tell us a little bit about how the housing program works, or your experience, or you can talk a little bit about the program itself.
You can be honest.
Well, housing was amazing. I mean, I was able to get an apartment and have it paid for through the housing department. Amazing case manager that helped me kind of, work on things that I needed to get back on my feet without, I can't speak enough about it. It gave me it's hard to leave when you know that you don't have a way to get by. So with all of this added support, it really was amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So will you tell us a little bit about what happens? Like, somebody's listening right now, they feel like, if I leave this situation, I don't have a safe place to go. I don't have family support. I don't have anyone who can take me in. I don't know where my kids will put their heads down, and I don't have extra beds or pots and pans. What happens in our housing department?
Well, in the housing department, our focus is to meet the clients where they are at. So if they're at their lowest, we're going to meet them at their lowest, and we're going to set them up for success. It's just important that they do the work and allow them to be in the driver's seat. They let us know what it is they want to accomplish. The only thing that we ask is that you work your program to the best of your ability and modify where needed. We help them we give them resources to find places in Placer County where they can be housed. They can live wherever they want to live as long as it's in their monthly stipend. And then we do case management weekly, to where we help them with budgeting, we help them with financial coaching, individual service plan, as well as case management. So if they need food, if they need furniture, we connect them with all of those resources to help them to get on their feet. We've had clients who came in the program that were financially okay, but they did not have life skills. So we would help build up that self-esteem, help them to navigate the community for resources for their children, and just build them up. And then there were those that were really had nothing, and we were able to help them to get into school, find employment at entry levels, and make a livable wage. And we house them for up to 2 years. Some take the full 2 years, some don't. It just depends on where they're at. And that's where we start. And the housing program has been very successful. We have a team of 4 right now, and I'm very proud to say that I wish it would have been, those resources would have been available to me. And so that's how I try to build a program to where we are moving with a spirit of empathy.
Right.
If it was me, what would I want someone to do for me? So, yeah, you don't have to be alone. You don't have to be alone. We're here for you.
Awesome. So we only have a couple minutes left. I want to touch on other services that people might be able to access, and things like, we are the Rape Crisis Center for Placer County. If somebody has suffered from sexual assault or human trafficking, you can call our crisis line. We partner with law enforcement, with Child Protective Services, with other community partners, and make sure that you have all the resources that you might need. We respond on scene when there's a situation going on with any of those things. We help with legal situations that people might have, court, with temporary restraining orders or custody or divorce or separation or any of those legal things. We have pro bono attorneys ready to help you. So don't let financial resources be a reason not to access services. Don't let the fear of being alone be a reason to not access services. Don't worry that you may be put out on the street, because we have those kinds of resources here in Placer County. And for some of you, this is hitting you hard because maybe you know someone who's gone through something like this before and you want to know how you can help. So the number one thing I would say is listen and believe, and don't judge and don't pressure. As you've heard these ladies talk about today, that made more of a difference, the people who listen and believe, than, you know, the court interventions and things like that that they were able to get. So really just listen and believe. And then if you want to partner with us, you can go to standupplacer.org and look at our employment opportunities. You can go there to donate if you want to be one of our financial partners. You can go to our thrift store that we have that is on Douglas between Ross and Hobby Lobby. Donate that old couch that's been sitting in your garage for a while, or, you know, if it's time to upgrade your pots and pans, bring in your gently used pots and pans, because those go directly into our store, but our survivors shop for free. So when we have these survivors who left in the middle of the night with only a backpack, they can go into the thrift store and be able to get anything that they need to be able to move on and have their home all supplied for. And also we have our annual run coming up September 30th. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's a 5K, 10K walk or run, and we also have the 1K walk because I've been getting ready for that one with my donut and Reese's habit. But welcome to come out, register for that online. You can follow us on Facebook, and through there you'll hear all of our projects that we're working on. Twitter and Instagram, we're not quite as active, but you can follow us there as well. And so I just really want to take another minute to just thank you both for coming here and sharing your story. It's a difficult story to share, even in this day and age where we know it's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men are victims of domestic violence, sexual assault. We know that we help men and women. 20% of our survivors are male. We help transgendered individuals with any of the services you heard about today. Our safe house is open. And so thank you so much for being able to come here and having the courage to let everyone know that you have experienced this yourself, that you have the compassion, that stigma doesn't need to be there. We're conquering that one moment at a time. And just for sharing your story and being real with your journey. Thank you so much. And for all the help that you give people. And thank you to the audience for tuning in to ACTV and for your support and willingness to stand up to domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Have a great day.